The needle slipped through ivory silk like a whispered secret, a sound I'd come to know better than my own heartbeat over the last 6 months. It was 2 in the morning. My tiny kitchen in the quiet suburbs of Austin, Texas was lit by a single lamp, its yellow glow turning my world into a small, sacred circle of fabric and thread. On my old dining table, the wedding dress for my only daughter, Jessica, spread out like captured moonlight. 6 months of my life were woven into that gown. 6 months of prayers, of memories, of hopes for a future I wanted so desperately for her. I'm Carol. At 62, with a teacher's pension that barely covered the bills and a quiet life built from the ashes of losing my husband 20 years ago, this dress was my ultimate gift. It was more than a dress. It was my legacy, my love letter to the child I'd raised alone. I'd used techniques my own mother had taught me, techniques that felt like a connection to a past I cherished. French seams so the inside of the dress was as beautiful as the outside. A hand-rolled hem that had taken me 3 full weeks of painstaking work. And the pearls. Tiny seed pearls sewn one by one in spiraling patterns across the bodice until my fingers bled and my eyes burned. I'd sacrificed my grocery money for 3 weeks to afford this specific bolt of silk charmeuse. Its weight felt like liquid gold in my hands. I remember Jess when she was a little girl wrapping herself in my curtains pretending to be a queen. I wanted her to feel like a real queen on her wedding day. The morning sun was just beginning to paint golden squares across my linoleum floor as I made the very last stitch. I snipped the thread, my hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from the sheer weight of the love I had poured into this creation. My reflection in the dark kitchen window showed a woman worn thin by worry and lean from years of stretching every dollar. But my eyes, magnified by my reading glasses, held a quiet satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. This was the work of my hands. It was the culmination of a lifetime of skill, honed by necessity, mending clothes, making Halloween costumes, altering thrift store finds to make ends meet. After my Toby died from a heart attack when Jess was just 12, my sewing machine became my partner in survival. Every pleat in this dress held decades of muscle memory. Every dart was shaped by the ghosts of countless alterations that had kept us afloat. Today, Jess would see it. Today, she would slip into this gown, and she would know without a doubt how deeply she was loved. I carefully wrapped the dress in layers of acid-free tissue paper, the way my mother had taught me to preserve things, my heart swelling with a painful, beautiful hope. This wasn't just fabric and thread. It was my heart offered up for my daughter's happiness. The question that lingered in the quiet air was, would she see it for what it truly was? The Driskill Hotel rose before me like a wedding cake made of brick and marble, a historic landmark in the heart of downtown Austin that screamed of old money and influence. Its valet parking alone cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Jessica had chosen this venue. Or, rather, her future mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, had chosen it for her. I tried not to let the wave of inadequacy wash over me as I handed my 10-year-old Toyota to a valet who looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. Holding the precious garment bag against my chest, I felt like an imposter in a world of wealth I could never comprehend. When I'd first heard about the venue, knowing my modest teacher's pension couldn't stretch to such extravagance, I'd offered to help with the flowers, something I could manage. But Eleanor had smiled that paper-thin smile of hers, the kind that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. "Oh, Carol, don't you worry about a thing," she'd chirped, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. Her tone made it clear that my contribution wasn't just unnecessary, it was unwanted. The bridal suite on the top floor hummed with expensive chaos. It was less a room and more command center, with Eleanor positioning a team of professionals like a general deploying troops. There was a makeup artist with a kit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, a hairstylist whose scissors moved with surgical precision, and a photographer whose camera clicked incessantly, capturing every manufactured moment of candid preparation. And in the center of it all sat my daughter, Jessica.
She was a porcelain doll, beautiful and still, while strangers painted and prodded and fussed over her. She had always been lovely, my Jess, but today she looked like someone else entirely. Someone polished to a high shine that reflected back only what others wanted to see. Her eyes met mine in the mirror, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of the little girl I knew. Then it was gone, replaced by the cool, appraising gaze of a woman I was only just beginning to meet. "Mom?" Her voice carried that particular tone, one I knew all too well. It meant she needed something, but was already preparing to be disappointed by what I could offer. "You're here, good. We're almost ready for the dress." I lifted the garment bag with the reverence reserved for sacred things. My hands were steady, my purpose clear. This was my moment, my contribution, the one thing Eleanor Vance couldn't buy. "I brought the dress," I said, my voice softer than I had intended. All the noise, all the chatter in the room seemed to die down as every eye turned to me and the simple protective bag in my hands. The air grew thick with anticipation, and a knot of dread began to form in my stomach. What if it wasn't enough? Eleanor looked up from her orchestration of wedding perfection, her gaze settling on my garment bag like a judge weighing evidence. She said, "Oh, the dress you made." The word "made" fell from her lips like a diplomatic apology for something embarrassing but unavoidable. "It's very quaint." I ignored her, my focus entirely on Jessica. This was my moment, my contribution, the one thing Eleanor Vance couldn't buy. I began to unzip the bag, my fingers trembling slightly, not from nerves, but from the intensity of the love that had gone into this creation. The ivory silk emerged first, cascading out of the bag like water taking shape. For a breathtaking moment, the room fell silent. Even the photographer lowered his camera. The dress, under the bright lights of the suite, seemed to glow from within. The hand-sewn pearls caught the light, shimmering like a constellation of tiny stars. "It's..." Jess began, her voice a whisper. She took a step closer, her eyes wide. I saw a flash of genuine wonder, of the awe that I had dreamed of seeing on her face. My heart soared. She saw it. She truly saw it. But then Eleanor stepped forward, her shadow falling over the gown. She moved with the air of an inspector examining damaged goods. She leaned in, her sharp eyes scanning the intricate bodice. "It's very handmade," she finished, her voice flat. The word, which should have been a compliment, sounded like an accusation. "The beading is quite rustic, isn't it?"
Rustic. 6 months of French seams and hand-embroidered pearls, dismissed as rustic. I felt something shift inside my chest, a small door closing with a quiet click. Eleanor turned her attention back to Jess, her voice now honeyed with false kindness. "Darling, perhaps we should consider the backup option we discussed, the Vera Wang from the boutique. It's more appropriate for the photographs, for a venue like the Driscoll." Jessica's eyes darted between the dress I'd poured my soul into and the woman who would soon be her mother-in-law. I watched my daughter weigh her choices like a merchant calculating profit and loss. I saw the exact moment she chose the path that led away from me, the path paved with money and status. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the decision that my love, my sacrifice, was not worth the price of Eleanor's disapproval. Her face, a mask of strained apology, turned to me. "Mom, I think maybe we should go with the other dress." She paused, searching for words that wouldn't cut too deep. But it was too late. The wound was already open. This one, it's just not quite right for the venue. The needle-sharp pain of rejection pierced through 28 years of scraped knees I'd bandaged, nightmares I'd chased away, and dreams I'd encouraged. I folded the dress back into its tissue paper shroud, my movements careful and precise, the way I'd learned to handle disappointment with my dignity intact. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice betraying no emotion. "Whatever makes you happy." I stepped out into the hallway to give them privacy, but mostly to breathe. The door didn't click shut behind me. It was a mistake, a tiny oversight. But the words I heard next would shatter my world completely. The hallway's thick carpet muffled the sounds of wedding preparation, but the door I hadn't quite closed became a conduit for the truth. Eleanor's voice, sharp and triumphant, cut through the air. "Thank God you came to your senses, darling. Can you imagine the photographs? Everyone would wonder where on earth that thing came from." Then I heard it, a sound that pierced straight through my soul. My daughter's laughter. It was a bright, nervous laugh, like someone desperate to please. "It's okay, Eleanor," Jessica said, her voice giddy with relief. And then came the words that would be seared into my memory forever. "If she asks, I'll just tell her it doesn't fit. It looks like something from a thrift store anyway." Thrift store! The words hit like physical blows. My breath caught in my chest. I leaned against the wall, the garment bag clutched against my heart like a shield. 6 months. 6 months of my life, my love, my hope that I still mattered to the child I'd raised. 6 months of lonely nights and sacrificed meals. Reduced to thrift store embarrassment and nervous laughter? I stood in that hotel hallway and felt something fundamental shift inside me. It wasn't a break. Breaking implied something that could be mended, something that could be put together again. This was more profound. It was an evolution, like a snake shedding skin it had outgrown. The skin of the devoted, self-sacrificing mother. The skin of a woman who had always put her daughter's needs, her daughter's happiness, above her own dignity. That skin was now lying discarded on the plush carpet of the Driscoll Hotel. Through the partially open door, I could see them. I saw Jessica stepping into the Vera Wang gown, her face radiant with relief. I saw Eleanor zip her up with the smug satisfaction of someone who had successfully averted a social disaster. The photographer snapped away, capturing the moment of transformation from my daughter to Eleanor's daughter-in-law. And on a velvet armchair in the corner, my creation, my love letter, lay forgotten like discarded wrapping paper. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It had solidified into something else, something hard and clear. Resolve. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked back into the room with the measured steps of a woman who had made a decision. Before I tell you what I did next, I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, hearing those words from your own child, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments below. I truly want to know. Okay, here's what happened. I walked back into the bridal suite and the hum of activity quieted for a moment as all eyes turned to me. I ignored them all, my gaze fixed on the discarded garment bag on the chair. I walked over and lifted it, my movements now filled with a newfound purpose. "I'm going to take this home," I said, my voice even and calm. Jessica, catching her reflection in the mirror, turned to me. "Oh, Mom, I'm sorry," she said, the words sounding hollow, an afterthought. "I can maybe wear it to the rehearsal dinner or a brunch." A consolation prize. My 6 months of labor, my masterpiece, reduced to a brunch outfit. "No," I said, simply. "That won't be necessary." I walked to my daughter, this beautiful stranger in a designer gown. I kissed her forehead, inhaling the scent of expensive hairspray and borrowed perfume that smelled nothing like the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Have a beautiful wedding, sweetheart," I whispered. The words were automatic, a reflex from a lifetime of maternal duty, but the feeling behind them was gone. As I walked down the hotel corridor, my back straight and my head held high, I heard Eleanor say to someone, "Well, that was easier than I expected. Some people just need to accept reality." The elevator doors closed, and it felt like they were closing on my old life. In my arms, wrapped in tissue paper and wounded pride,
lay the beginning of something entirely else. Outside, the humid Austin air carried the scent of possibility mixed with exhaust fumes and other people's dreams. I placed the dress carefully in my car's back seat, settling it like precious cargo for a journey to an unknown destination. The drive home took me past the neighborhood where I'd raised Jess alone, past the school where I'd taught history for 37 years, past all the familiar landmarks of a life lived in service to others. But today, those places looked different, smaller somehow, as if I'd been seeing them through the wrong end of a telescope. My house, with its familiar creaks and shadows, welcomed me back. I spread the dress across my dining room table once more, smoothing the silk with gentle hands. This was not thrift store work. This was artistry born of love and honed by necessity. This dress deserved a life. It deserved to be seen, to be cherished, and in that quiet, sun-drenched moment, I knew I could not let it die in a closet. What would I do with it? I had no idea. But I knew its story wasn't over.
On the fourth day, the doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with dark curls escaping from a messy bun, holding a casserole dish and wearing an expression of pure determination. I opened the door to a face I vaguely recognized. "Mrs. Davis?" Her voice was warm. "I'm Maria Flores. I used to work at the coffee shop near campus where Jess studied. We were friendly." The name conjured a vague memory of Jess mentioning her years ago, before her social circle narrowed to include only people who could advance her husband's career. Maria held out the casserole dish like an offering. "Chicken enchiladas," she said with an authentic smile. "My grandmother's recipe. I figured you might not be up for cooking much this week." "How did you—" I started. "Jess called me," Maria said, simply, her dark eyes flashing with indignation. 3 nights ago, crying drunk from her hotel room, she told me what happened, what she said about the dress. She shook her head. "I wanted to drive over there and slap some sense into her, but Mexico is a little far for an intervention." Despite myself, I almost smiled. "Come in." "I was just making coffee." Maria stepped into my foyer and stopped dead. Her gaze was fixed on the dining room where the dress was displayed in all its glory. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, then clapped her hand over her mouth. "Sorry, I mean, holy... Is that the dress?" "That's the dress." She approached it like a pilgrim approaching a shrine, her fingers hovering inches above the silk, afraid to touch. "Mrs. Davis," she said, turning to me, her expression a mixture of awe and fury, "this is museum-quality work, the beadwork alone. How long did this take you?" 6 months. 6 months, she repeated, her voice low and dangerous. 6 months of your life, and she called it thrift store quality in front of that ice queen mother-in-law? I found myself nodding, surprised by the relief of having someone, anyone, acknowledge the enormity of the betrayal. "You know," Maria said, circling the dress like an art critic studying a masterpiece, "I went to fashion school for a year before my dad got sick and I had to come home. I've been a barista ever since, doing alterations on the side, but I have never seen anything like this outside of a museum." Something stirred in my chest, a feeling I'd almost forgotten. Recognition, professional respect. But what she said next would plant a seed I never expected to grow. We sat in my kitchen, Maria's infectious enthusiasm filling the space like sunlight through winter windows. She asked detailed questions about my techniques, admired photos of other pieces I'd made over the years, and listened with genuine interest. It felt incredible to be seen, to be understood by someone who spoke the same language of darts and seams. Then, cradling her coffee mug, she looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "my best friend Sarah is getting married in 3 months. Her budget is basically non-existent. She's a kindergarten teacher, her fiancé is a social worker. She's been crying for weeks because she can't afford anything decent and she's too proud to ask for help." The implication hung in the air between us, a bridge waiting to be crossed. I looked through the archway at the dress,
silk that had never felt the joy it was created for. I think she'd want to wear a rejected dress. I asked, the words tasting like ash. I think she'd cry with gratitude to wear a dress that beautiful. She's been looking at polyester disasters online for under $200. This, she gestured toward the dining room, this would make her feel like a queen. That afternoon, Maria brought Sarah to my house. She was a woman of perhaps 30, with kind eyes and the weary posture of someone who gives too much of herself to the world. She walked into my dining room and simply stopped breathing. "Oh, Carl," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Did you really make this?" I nodded, watching her face cycle through emotions, wonder, recognition, and then a flash of protective anger on my behalf. She didn't wear it. It was a statement, not a question. No, she chose something else. She reached out to touch the silk, then pulled her hand back as if afraid she might damage something so precious. "I can't. This is too beautiful. It belongs in a $50,000 wedding, not in a backyard barbecue with folding chairs." "Sarah," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice, "this dress was made with love. It was meant to celebrate a marriage, to make someone feel beautiful on the most important day of their life. That someone could be you." Maria nudged her friend. "Try it on. Just try it on." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood before my bedroom mirror, transformed. The dress fit her as if it had been made for her body. The ivory tone warmed her skin, and the hand-sewn pearls caught the light like stars. Her voice cracked with emotion. "I look like a real bride." "No," I corrected gently, echoing my earlier thought. "You look like yourself. Just magnificent." Maria pulled out her phone, her eyes shining. "Hold still. I need to document this miracle." The photo she took captured something magical. Sarah's radiant smile, the perfect drape of the silk, the way confidence had transformed her posture. In that image, she was the epitome of joy. But I had no idea that a single photograph was about to change everything. "Okay, I have an idea," Maria said, her eyes gleaming with a look that was part brilliance, part disaster. "I think we should post this photo." "Gloria, no," I warned, the thought of any more public attention making me shrink. "Just on my Instagram," she insisted, already typing on her phone. "I have like 300 followers, mostly other baristas and some old art school friends. What's the harm?" Before I could protest further, she did it. She posted the photo of the radiant Sarah with a caption that made my chest tight with unexpected pride. It read, "When your best friend needs a wedding dress on a teacher's budget, and your new friend's mom happens to be a secret master seamstress. This gown was hand-sewn over 6 months by Carol Davis, a retired teacher who clearly missed her calling. Sarah is glowing, and this dress is proof that real artistry exists in the most unexpected places. Hashtag handmade couture, hashtag real artist, hashtag wedding dress, hashtag talented women." The response was immediate and overwhelming. It started with comments from her followers, "That dress is unreal. Where can I get one?" And then their friends started sharing it, and their friends' friends. Within hours, Maria's phone was buzzing non-stop, with comments, shares, and direct messages. By evening, the photo had been shared nearly 50 times, and by the next morning, it had reached 2,000 views, and Maria was fielding inquiries from as far as Portland and San Francisco. "Mrs. D," Maria said, arriving at my door the next morning with coffee, croissants, and an expression of barely contained excitement. She held up her phone, scrolling through an endless feed of praise. "I think we need to talk about starting a business." I sat at my kitchen table, stunned into silence, reading comment after comment. For decades, I'd sewn out of necessity, mending clothes, hemming curtains, making do. But this felt like possibility. This felt like possibility and potentiality.
"I don't know the first thing about running a business," I said, the words feeling flimsy and inadequate. "But you know everything about making dresses that make women feel like goddesses," Maria countered, her eyes shining. "That's the hard part. The business stuff? We can learn that. Together." Through my dining room window, I could see my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, walking her dog. the same route she'd taken every day for 15 years. Same time, same pace, same predictable orbit. Just a few days ago, I'd been following my own predictable orbit. Retired teacher, discarded mother, a woman whose best years were assumed to be behind her. Now, Sarah's photo smiled back at me from Maria's phone, and strangers were asking to pay me for the skills I'd almost let die in silence. The world suddenly felt bigger, brighter, and terrifyingly new. Was I brave enough to step into it? A business? I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Maria, I'm 62 years old. People my age are planning their retirement finances, not starting new ventures. And that's exactly why we should do it, she insisted, her energy contagious. We can call it heirloom stitches. We'll create custom clothing for women who've been ignored by the fashion industry. Real women with real bodies and real lives. The idea was terrifying. It meant risk. It meant taking my small savings, the little security I had, and betting it on myself. But the alternative, sitting in this quiet house, slowly fading away, was suddenly even more terrifying. Okay, I breathed, the word a quiet promise. Let's do it. We spent the next few weeks in a whirlwind of activity. Maria, with her boundless energy, helped me set up a basic website, calculate pricing that reflected both my skill and my need to eat, and navigate the strange new world of social media. We took on 7 commissions, my spare bedroom transforming into a bustling design studio. The house, once silent, was now filled with the hum of my sewing machine and Maria's excited chatter. And then, just as I was starting to feel the first stirrings of true hope, the phone rang. The caller ID showed a name that made my heart plummet. Jessica. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. I'd heard through family channels that the honeymoon had been perfect, that she and her new husband, Mark, were settling into married life beautifully. I steeled myself and answered. Mom, she began, her voice carrying that particular breathlessness that meant she was about to ask for something while pretending to offer it. I heard about all the attention you're getting for your sewing. I think it's wonderful. Do you? I asked, my voice neutral. Of course. And I was thinking maybe we could meet for lunch. I have some ideas about how to help you expand your little business of yours. This little business, the phrase landed like a paper cut. Small, but surprisingly painful. Mark has some insights about scaling artisan businesses. He thinks you could streamline your process, use different materials that are more cost-effective, maybe some synthetic blends instead of all that expensive silk. And we could source beading wholesale from China instead of you hand-sewing everything. He says the key to profitability is reducing labor-intensive processes. Synthetic blends, wholesale beads. She wanted me to strip away everything that made my work special, everything that made it mine, and turn it into a cheap, mass-marketable commodity. She hadn't changed at all. She still saw my art as a hobby, a quaint little project that needed her husband's superior business acumen to be made respectable. For the first time, I didn't try to smooth things over. I didn't swallow my pride. Thank you for the offer, Jessica, I said, my voice colder than I intended. But I'm not interested in making my work cheaper. I'm interested in making it better. I have to go now. I have a client waiting. I hung up before she could respond, my hand shaking. It was the first time I had ever put my own needs, my own artistic integrity, before her desires. It felt terrifying. And it felt absolutely fantastic. But had I just started a war I wasn't prepared to fight? The confrontation with Jessica, as unsettling as it was, fueled me. It solidified my resolve. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a declaration of independence. My waiting list grew, and soon a call came that left me speechless. It was Betty Reynolds from Channel 7 News in Austin. She'd seen the Instagram post and the buzz online. She wanted to do a feature story on the retired teacher turned couturier.
I was terrified, but Maria convinced me. The interview was a blur, but when it aired, I saw a woman on screen I barely recognized. She was confident, passionate, and professional. She demonstrated the beadwork on Sarah's dress, explaining the difference between machine-sewn and hand-rolled hems. She didn't look like someone's discarded mother filling empty hours. She looked like an artist. The story was a massive success. Our website crashed from the traffic. Our waiting list extended to 8 months. We were on top of the world. And that, I would soon learn, was a very dangerous place to be. The call came 2 days after the news feature aired. It was Betty Reynolds, the reporter. Her voice was cautious. "Carol, I'm just following up on something. We received a call this morning. An anonymous tip." My blood ran cold. A tip? About what? The caller claimed to be a concerned citizen, Betty said carefully. They alleged that your designs are not entirely your own, that you're copying patterns from high-end designers and passing them off as original. They also suggested you might have some questionable business practices regarding your material sourcing. I sank into a chair, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. The accusations were ludicrous, baseless, but the poison was in the suggestion, the doubt. There was only one person who would feel threatened enough, who was malicious enough to do something like this. Eleanor Vance. She couldn't stand me seeing me succeed. My small victory was an affront to her world where value was determined by price tags and brand names, not by skill or love. My success, born from her cruelty, was a narrative she couldn't control, so she decided to destroy it. "Carol, are you there?" Betty's voice crackled over the line. "I'm here," I managed to say, my own voice a stranger's whisper. "And it's all lies." But how do you fight a lie whispered in the dark by a powerful enemy? How do you prove your integrity against the claims of a ghost? For the first time since this journey began, I felt a tremor of real fear. Eleanor wasn't just going to let me win. She was going to burn my new world to the ground. I have to pause here for a second and just say thank you. Thank you for sticking with my story this long. It means the world to me. If you're still with me on this crazy journey, just do me a favor and comment the number 1 below so I know you're here. Your support gives me strength. Okay, you won't believe what we did next. Panic seized me. It was a cold, gripping fear that threatened to undo all the progress I had made. Eleanor had money, connections, and a complete lack of scruples. I had my sewing machine and a barista turned business partner. The fight seemed impossibly skewed. "She's trying to ruin us," I said to Maria, my voice trembling as I recounted the phone call. "She'll believe her. A story about a dishonest old woman is much more interesting than the truth."
Maria listened, her jaw tightening with every word I spoke. When I was finished, she didn't offer sympathy, she offered a battle plan. "No," she said, her eyes flashing with defiance. "We're not going to let her. We're not going to hide. We're going to fight her with the one thing she can't buy. The truth." "How?" "We host an open studio," she declared, "this weekend. We'll invite Betty Reynolds and her camera crew back. We'll put up flyers. We'll post it all over social media. We'll invite the public to come into our space, to see our work in progress, to touch the fabrics, to look at my design sketches and your patterns. We will show them everything." Let's see Eleanor's anonymous lie stand up to that kind of radical transparency. It was a brilliant, terrifying idea. It meant putting ourselves, our messy creative process, our very souls on display. But it was our only move. We worked like demons for the next 4 days. We cleaned and organized the studio, which had taken over my entire first floor. We carefully laid out my original patterns, pinned to dress forms.
We displayed bolts of silk and lace with receipts from local suppliers. We created a process wall, showing a design from initial sketch to finished garment. On Saturday morning, my heart was pounding as we opened the door. What if no one came? What if they came and sneered? But they did come. First, a few curious neighbors, then more people who had seen the story on the news. And then Betty Reynolds arrived with her cameraman. For 3 hours, our home was filled with people. They asked questions. They marveled at the intricate handwork. They watched me demonstrate a French seam. Betty interviewed clients who were there for fittings, who spoke emotionally about how my designs made them feel seen and beautiful. Maria, a natural-born storyteller, walked everyone through our creative process. We didn't just defend ourselves, we celebrated our craft. We turned an attack into an opportunity. The follow-up news story was even more powerful than the first. It wasn't just about a talented seamstress anymore. It was about 2 women standing up to a faceless bully, fighting for their integrity with grace and honesty. Our waiting list doubled overnight. We had won the battle, but I knew, deep down, that the war with my daughter's new family was far from over. Months passed in a blur of silk, thread, and happy clients. We officially named our business Heirloom Stitches and used my savings to lease a small, sunlit storefront on South Congress Avenue. My little house was finally my own again, and our business had a proper home. We hired 2 other seamstresses, both women over 50 who'd been told their skills were obsolete. Our studio became a haven, a place of second chances. Then the call came from Texas Monthly. They wanted to do a major feature on us for their Women in Business issue. We were ecstatic. The writer and photographer spent a week with us, capturing the spirit of our work. I was honest with them. I told them my story, all of it, thinking they would focus on my career reinvention. I never imagined they would dig so deep. The magazine hit the stands in early November. The article was titled, "The Seamstress of South Congress." But the sidebar is what made my phone start ringing and not stop for 3 days. Under the headline, "The Dress That Started It All," the magazine had printed the full story of Jessica's wedding. They'd spoken to Maria, to Sarah, the bride who wore the dress, and even, through some journalistic magic, found other wedding guests who remembered the Vera Wang drama. They detailed how I spent 6 months creating a couture gown only to have it dismissed as thrift store quality. They even had a photo of Sarah looking radiant in my dress next to a grainy long lens shot of Jessica in her designer gown. They had the decency to blur Jessica's face, but the story was unmistakable. The public response was a tidal wave. Hashtag Heirloom Stitches started trending on Twitter. Fashion bloggers wrote think pieces about ageism in creative industries. But most tellingly, orders poured in from women who specifically mentioned wanting to support a business that honored, rather than dismissed, their mother's generation. The phone call I had been dreading finally came. It was Jessica. Her voice wasn't apologetic, it was furious. "How could you?" she shrieked into the phone. "How could you humiliate me like this? Mark's clients are seeing this. Eleanor is beside herself." "I told a reporter my story, Jessica," I said calmly, pinning a lace applique onto a bodice. "It's the same story you created that day at the hotel. You did it to get back at me, to make me look bad." I paused, the needle still in my hand. "No, Jess," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I didn't do this to you. This is the life I built after you. There is a very big difference." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with her shock and indignation. She still didn't get it. She still thought the world revolved around her. She had no idea how much I had changed, and that her opinion, once the sun around which my world orbited, was now just a distant, dying star. A week later, the bell on our shop door chimed, and Jessica walked in.
She wore an expensive wool coat, her face a mask of cold fury. She moved through the studio like someone touring a museum exhibit of an enemy's victory, her eyes taking in the bolts of luxurious fabric, the dress forms draped in half-finished gowns, the gallery wall of our happy clients. "This is quite the operation you have here," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We like it," I replied simply, continuing to work on the cutting table. She finally got to the point. "You need to fix this," she demanded. "You need to call the magazine and issue a retraction. Tell them they misunderstood. Tell them it was all a private family matter." I set down my shears and looked at her. Really looked at her. This grown woman who was my daughter. "There is nothing to retract, Jessica. They told the truth." "You're my mother," she cried, her voice cracking. "You're supposed to protect me." That was the line, the one that I had been waiting for. I walked over to her, my steps measured and calm. "I did protect you, Jessica," I said, my voice low and steady, "for 28 years. I protected you from poverty after your father died. I protected you from loneliness. I protected you from every hardship I could bear on my own shoulders. The one person I forgot to protect was myself. From you." Her face crumpled. For a moment, I saw a flicker of real hurt, of real remorse. Maybe, I thought, maybe she finally understands. But then she did something that erased any shred of hope I had left. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a checkbook. A checkbook! "Fine," she sniffed, wiping away a tear. "What'll it take? Mark and I, we're prepared to make a significant investment in your little company. A silent partnership, enough to ensure your financial security forever. In exchange for your discretion, for you to fix this mess." She tried to buy me. She tried to buy my silence, my dignity, with her husband's money. After everything, she still believed that was the answer. That my love, my pain, my art, it all had a price tag. I looked at the checkbook in her hand, then back at her face. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a vast, calm, bottomless pity. I slowly shook my head. "Your money can't fix this, Jessica," I said softly. "It can't buy what you broke." She stared at me, utterly baffled, as if I had just started speaking a foreign language. The chasm between us had become too wide to ever cross again. "What do you mean?" Jessica asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Everyone has a price. Mark says so." "Your husband is wrong," I replied, turning back to my work table. The feel of the smooth, cool silk under my fingers was more real, more honest than anything she was offering. "I'm not for sale, Jessica. My story isn't for sale, and my dignity certainly isn't for sale." I picked up my shears and made a long, clean cut through a piece of deep blue velvet. The sound was crisp and final. "This business," I said, not looking at her, "was built on the ashes of what you threw away. It was funded by my life savings. It was built with Maria's faith and my skill. It's a testament to every woman who has ever been told she's not good enough or too old or that her work doesn't matter. It is everything your money represents the opposite of. So no, I don't want your investment." She stood there for a long moment, the useless checkbook still in her hand. I could feel her wrestling with the reality she couldn't comprehend. A world where she wasn't the center, where her power and her husband's money meant nothing. She was the one who had walked away from my love, yet she was acting as if I had betrayed her. Finally, she put the checkbook away. "I don't understand you anymore," she whispered, her voice small and defeated. "I know. Maybe that's the point. You're not supposed to. This isn't about you anymore." With nothing left to say, she turned and walked out of the shop. The little bell chimed her exit. I watched her go,
a stylish figure disappearing into the afternoon crowd on South Congress. I didn't feel the sharp pain of rejection like I had at the hotel. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pity anymore. I just felt free. Maria came out from the back room, where she had been discreetly waiting. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fabric and hot tea and possibility. I looked around our beautiful studio, at the dresses waiting to make other women feel powerful and seen, at the warm afternoon light streaming through the windows. "I'm perfect," I said, and I meant it. Heirloom Stitches was more than a business. It was a community. It was a revolution, one stitch at a time. It was my real legacy, not the one I had tried to give my daughter, but the one I had built for myself. And it was just getting started. A year to the day after Jessica's wedding, the documentary about us, titled Heirloom Stitches: The Second Act, premiered on Netflix. I watched it with Maria, our 2 seamstresses, and a few of our first clients, all crowded into our studio. We had champagne and my homemade chicken enchiladas. As the credits rolled, a picture appeared on the screen. Sarah, in the original wedding dress, laughing with pure joy on her wedding day. The final shot of the film was me sitting at my sewing machine, looking directly into the camera. The voiceover was my own. I used to think my purpose was to be a mother, and I was a good one. But it turns out that was just my first act. My second act is about being the artist I was always meant to be. The life I have now is richer and more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. Our business is thriving. We're opening a second location in Dallas next year. But more importantly, every day I get to help women celebrate themselves. We create armor and art for women navigating divorces, promotions, milestone birthdays, and new beginnings. I haven't spoken to Jessica since that day in the shop. I hear she's happy, and I truly hope she is. But her world is not my world. I realized that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's behavior. It's about releasing their power over you. I have forgiven her by building a life so full of joy and purpose that her actions no longer have the power to cause me pain. My story started with the heartbreak of a rejected gift, but it ended with the discovery of the greatest gift of all, myself. It proves that it's never too late to pick up the pieces, not to rebuild what you lost, but to create something more beautiful, more honest, and entirely your own. Your second act is always waiting. You just have to be brave enough to start sewing. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. This community has meant everything. Your story matters, and I'd be honored if you shared a piece of it. Have you ever had a moment that changed your life's direction? A second act you never saw coming? Please share your experience in the comments below. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs to see today. And if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to share these powerful stories together. Thank you for listening.